Washington deadlocked, sounds familiar, but this time, as we know, over something that frankly has gotten too much politics in it lately. Of course, I'm talking about appointing a Supreme Court nominee. Now, the court had its first deadlock case since Antonin Scalia's death, a 4-4 stalemate in a bankruptcy case. We're also learning more about Merrick Garland, President Obama's nominee. Time saying in cases involving law enforcement, Judge Garland actually favored the cops in the vast majority of the cases. He's known as a moderate justice. We also know that Chief Justice John Roberts, none too happy with how politicized the nominating process has become. He had this to say a couple of weeks before Scalia passed away, and it's, I think, very timely given this conversation. Quote, "The process is not functioning very well. Look at my more recent colleagues, all extremely well qualified for the court, and the votes were, I think, strictly on party lines for the last three of them, or close to it. That doesn't make any sense. That suggests to me that the process is being used for something other than ensuring the qualifications of the nominees." In fact, saw many people may have seen on the editorial page in the Times, Richard Painter, who was a White House ethics lawyer in the Bush administration for 2 or 3 years, said this is a nominee, Merrick Garland, that Bush would have wanted on the high court. Garland also has a very close working relationship over the years with Justice Roberts and others. Grassley spoke extremely highly of him back in the day. It doesn't seem that there's any questions as to this man's qualifications. Politically, it's an open question whether or not he'll even get hearings, let alone an up or down vote. There seems to be indications that people want to at least have meetings with him on the Hill. Whether or not that turns into full hearings, I don't know. But it stinks. I mean, there should be 9 justices. I know it can function without it. We had 1-8, we had 1-4-4 decision. There's a couple more coming down the pike that also look to go to 4-4. I don't think the public realize that then kicks down to the lower court, right?
Well,
and
all the federal circuits.
Right, and that's not the way you're supposed to run, a rail station. I say this isn't the way this is supposed to work. They had a smarter idea back in the days, and there was 9 for a reason.
Absolutely, but are we surprised by any of this? The last 8 years have been nothing but the politicization of every single decision they have, which, by the way, we were talking about it before, is why we have the current campaign lunacy that we're witnessing. People are tired. Yep. People are tired of Washington and the way it operates. You have an issue here, though, in terms of what happens in the next few months in the Supreme Court, because there are some very significant decisions that are coming down. The Hobby Lobby case and the Quebec case, which followed it, which has to do with contraceptives and forcing nonprofits to pay for contraceptives. Without Justice Scalia, you've got a 4-4 vote, and you're absolutely right. It not only is counterproductive, but what happens in a 4-4 vote, one of two things. They can ask that it be argued next year again, when hopefully there will be 9 and you break the stalemate, or if it's decided 4-4, all the varying federal court decisions, which is why it goes to the Supreme Court for resolution in the first place, all of those federal court decisions will stand until the next case makes its way up, which could be 2-3 years down the road.
A lot of people maybe thought this really began in earnest. We've had other cases in history, but the Bork nomination. Nobody questioned he was brilliant as a jurist. A lot of people had problems with his rulings, enough so that the nomination got scuttled. And it seemed to have a cascading effect after that. I don't think on the face of it, Merrick Garland is going to strike anyone as an extremist for some of the positions. And I know people are bitter about the Bork decision, but again, I ask you to look again at some of the reasons why he wasn't confirmed. But that said, should a justice have to reflect the sitting president? And should that be enough, as long as he or she is competent, that they should be confirmed? Or should they be more representative of the beliefs of America at the time?
It should only be based on qualifications, and the Constitution, Article 2, Section 2, gives the power to the president to expeditiously appoint
nominate.
somebody,
Yeah.
not appoint with the advice and consent of the Senate. They are required to hold the hearing. The fact that they are refusing to hold a hearing, that should be litigated, because that's ridiculous. I have criticized President Obama's abuse of his executive power in the past, but here he went out of his way to pick someone who's not only qualified, but he has made it a staple of his administration to elevate people of diversity. He had an opportunity to put the first Asian Supreme Court justice up there, and he chose an old white guy because he felt he was more qualified. He chose someone with bipartisan support. He chose someone with a history of unification. So this is clearly a blatant attack on the president, and if you're going to pull politics in and hurt the country, then the Senate needs to be held accountable.
I think, man, this is going
Lead-in
to be
discussion
the
right
new
there.
normal. I mean, we kind of were there already. I wonder, is this just where the calendar is? Now, let's be fair. Now Vice President Biden and Senator Biden back in the 90s said something very similar to what McConnell's saying, which is you shouldn't be able to basically be a lame duck president and nominate a justice. I don't agree with them then. I don't agree with them now. But that said, both parties, I'm just worried that regardless of who you are as a president, if the opposing party is the majority going forward in the Senate, right, especially with the nuclear numbers that you're talking about right now, that this might be where we go down, which was never what the Supreme Court was intended for.
I think that you can go back through history and you find that both parties have a history of obstructing progress in the United States for political reasons, and whether Senator Schumer did the same thing is really academic. The key right now is, when you have half of the government deciding that it's going to have a stated objective of preventing anything from getting done, there's a problem. It doesn't matter which party says that. And also, simply imagine if all of the remaining justices, all 8 of them, simply decide in a benign way to retire, let alone any accident or anything else that could occur. Well, based upon the suggestion of the Senate right now, Mr. McConnell, we shouldn't have a Supreme Court because Obama's not able to appoint anybody, and that should wait for the next president. It's absurd.
The funny thing is it could very well backfire, because if a Democrat is in the White House,
you're
then
going to find a more progressive
they're losing,
nominee.
they're
Absolutely.
losing
But
somebody
then it
they'd
begs the
otherwise
question,
be
would they
happy
still
with.
have hearings?
Right.
Would they still confirm? I mean, we say, of course they would, but I don't know. We were in such uncharted political territory, and people always ask, well, what do you think is going to happen? I'm talking to some of these lawmakers. They don't know either.
Well, that's part of the reason that people are frustrated on both aisles of the democratic process, because you have Flint, Michigans, and you start to wonder, are people in government doing their jobs at all? And people are heavily taxed throughout the country, and you don't mind when you see that things are getting done. You like to go out and know the road is paved, but when you wonder, is your town the next Flint, Michigan, it doesn't give you a good feeling.
No, it does not, and I think the polls bear that out. Now, when we come back, we're going to bring this closer to home, and we spoke with a lawmaker who wants to provide legal places for people to shoot heroin. Table, discuss the legal ramifications of that one after this.